This process is for very deep scratches in your window, and it's a decent amount of work and it's time consuming. If you have experience with sanding for a paint job and then clear sanding, then you should have all the tools and a good idea of what to expect. If you don't, just be aware this is a very big job and it takes some tools and skill. This is what the window from my Fierro looked like before I started sanding. I had to remove the window because the scratches went all the way down inside of the door and couldn't be sanded while on the car. The fuzzy pads that hold the window in place wore out and scratched the glass. If your scratches are higher up, then you can leave the glass on the car. So now we are ready to begin sanding. We need to start with a coarse grit and then work our way higher and higher. There are kits that you can buy that come with 3 different grits of paper and the cubic zirconium stuff to polish it. Whole kits with everything you need except for the drill is about $80. With these kits, they try to do it in just 3 sanding steps. I did it in much more. You can start with 180 or 220 depending on what you have. The 5 and 6 inch discs seem to be the most common. I started with 220, but I had the wrong style of paper at first. The sandpaper I had was adhesive backed, and the 5-inch wheel that I had was a hook and loop style, aka Velcro. So it didn't work too well at first. Then I tried a smaller 2-inch wheel, and that wasn't flat enough. In fact, it actually left some swirl marks. This was because the tool was not flat and was only sanding on the outside of the wheel. I was able to fix this by sanding with 180 by hand. Yes, that took a while, but you can do this whole process by hand with sandpaper. However, the correct paper is available, but I didn't buy it until the next day. After sanding by hand for a while with 180 and 220, I got the correct hook and loop paper for my 5-inch wheel. Now I am sanding with 240 grit paper and keeping my RPMs low, probably around 1,000 RPMs. Just pretend I was using this type of sandpaper the whole time. You will notice that the deep scratches will start to disappear and the glass will start to look hazy. I used my air compressor to blow the dust out of the pad, and I kept the work area as small as possible. After I was done with the coarse grit 180, 220, and 240 sandpaper, I moved on to 400 grit, and that is not as coarse. This is when I really started to notice the difference, and the scratches were starting to disappear. Next, I did 600 grit by hand. This took a while because the paper gets plugged fast and I needed to blow it out continually with air. There is round hook and loop paper in this grit available, but once again, I didn't find it until I was done with the 600 grit. I found some 6-inch discs at Harbor Freight that were hook and loop style in 800 and 1000 grit, so I can use that with my rotary tool. I just had to trim the disc down to fit the 5-inch pad. So if you plan better than me, you can find all of the grits in the correct hook and loop style ahead of time. So same thing. I started with the 800 for a while. I think I used all 5 discs that came with the package, and then I finally moved up to the 1000 grit. Each time I moved up a grit level, the work area would get a little bit bigger to cover up the new scratches left from the previous grit. So keep the work area as small as you can with the coarse grit paper. When you are done sanding, the area should look nice and dull with no more noticeable scratches. If you still see scratches, you will need to keep sanding and maybe start all over, because the final buffing step does not remove scratches. Finally, it's time to buff with the Cerium Oxide, or the stuff I call cubic zirconium. For this step, you will need a wool buffing pad. You can buy these for 5-inch hook and loop wheels, or they will come with the kit if you buy the whole kit. The cubic zirconium needs to be mixed with water. The directions for this are not consistent, but you don't want it to be too watery or too thick. I just added about 8 ounces of water to a water bottle and added about 2 ounces of cubic zirconium. Even this was so thick, I kept plugging up the squirt bottle. I'm going to do this a little weird because I have a 3-inch pad on a 5-inch wheel. Once again, I bought the wrong size, but 5 inches is available. This is a very messy step, and you will have to be careful not to overheat the glass. Apply the cubic zirconium to the work area and start polishing. I didn't use a lot of RPMs here, maybe 1,000 RPM at most. It's important not to buff too long, or the glass will start to get really hot from the friction from the wool on the pad. If it's really hot, you could crack the glass, so keep it cool. Professionals try to bust this job out as soon as possible, and they do let the glass get pretty warm. But I'm not in a hurry, so slow and steady for me. Once you spray the zirconium on the glass and start to polish it, you will notice it will start to dry. When it's close to dry, that's when it's doing the majority of the abrasive polish, and this is when it will get hot. Just keep working the area a little bit at a time and keep checking the temperature of the glass. This took me a couple hours, but I didn't want to overheat the glass and break it. Wipe the work area off once in a while and see if the fog is gone. Keep doing this in sections until you are done. I only recommend doing this on side windows and not the windshield. If you have really deep scratches on your windshield or rear window, you can use this process to remove the scratches, but the glass will no longer be nice and smooth because of all the sanding. For really deep scratches like mine, there will be some waviness that will be visible in the glass. You can only notice it from certain angles, and it does look much better than it did with the scratches, but if you did this on a windshield, you will be looking through distortion, and it will probably be really distracting. If they are light scratches on your windshield, it may be fine. Just be aware that you are distorting the glass the more you sand. I'm very happy with my results, and I only have a couple of areas that I need to touch up because I got a little carried away when I was sanding with the 180 grit paper by hand. A couple of the scratches outside of the work area got missed, but I can now go back and sand those areas while the window is installed on the car. Good luck with your project, and smash that subscribe button for this and other GM content.